Hey guys, this is Fourth and Snarky. Okay, let's get into my week 3 favorites. We're going to start with the Jets and the Patriots. And man, does it pain me to say this, but Rodgers looks like the Rodgers I knew. This wasn't a fun game to watch, especially for me. I didn't want the MVP going to the Jets, since apparently this is where all quarterbacks from the Green Bay Packers go after they leave the Packers, and then to the Vikings. He looked great though, but that's really twofold. First, the Pats just aren't that great this season. I had hope for Brissett after week 1. I mean, with that win against the Bengals, I really thought that he had become a quarterback. But since then, they just haven't found any sense of rhythm. And the second is that the Jets just played a good game. Brissett was playing like a rookie rather than a 9-year vet. Yeah, he didn't have that many starts as a quarterback, but he was able to sit and listen and watch, and he should have been able to learn something. The Pats' offensive line also just looked bad. I really don't know what's going on there. I know Mayo's a new coach, but he was trained well. When they put Drake May in for those 4 minutes, he got sacked 4 times. That O-line just let everything come at that kid. The Patriots have already said that May is their future, but they're not really acting like it. If he is their future, they should have had more protection on him, because you don't want this kid getting hurt in one game that he's playing 4 minutes of and then being out and can't really do anything. Honestly, it was like the Pats just surrendered, which isn't the Patriots team that I have really ever seen. I will say that Brissett took this like a champ. I mean, he took responsibility. He stood on those sidelines even when some players would walk off after this, especially with such a devastating loss. I mean, 24-3 is pretty bad. But even in interviews, he took responsibility. So I will say on that front, he is a class act. God, Lazard just looked so good. Last year, he didn't look great without Rodgers, and I can't really put that all on him. It's a new team, it's a new playbook, and with the rotation of quarterbacks, when you're expecting to be with the guy that you've played with for years, yeah, he's going to look bad. That game, he looked like Alan Lazard. When Lazard and Rodgers connected, though, I was having flashbacks. There are so many games that I could point to, but Lazard was the go-to guy for those long throws, which Rodgers has that arm. Rodgers came out there looking like he was maybe 33 instead of 40. Garrett Wilson looked amazing. Yeah, he doesn't have the rhythm that Lazard has with Rodgers yet, but he'll get there. He needs time. I mean, again, last year it was a rotation of quarterbacks, and let's be honest, the Jets weren't great. The Jets defense looked really good. But I mean, that's not hard when you're playing a team like the Pats, who it was as if their offense was just tissue paper. So yeah, the Jets won, and Rodgers looked like Rodgers. Great. Everyone's so happy. Not really, but we could pretend. There was one thing that happened in the game, though, that had nothing to do with gameplay. In my real life, I'm a digital marketer and have been for almost 2 decades. So when I see marketing or graphic design issues, especially that happen in real time, they make me giggle. In the second quarter, Amazon threw up a graphic of Aaron Rodgers in a full Green Bay Packer uniform, and I will fully admit that I laughed hard. Now, I know whoever did that graphic either got reamed really bad or fired for that, but honestly, I don't know how I got past the planning stage, because in my experience, you're planning out these graphics for weeks in advance. It really made me laugh, especially after last week's former Green Bay Packer quarterback Aaron Rodgers comment. It was great. Okay, let's move on to the Browns and the Giants. Another week, another Browns team doing Browns things. Let's start with the lesser of two evils. I mean, that's not really true. I mean, one is evil and one is just a wet noodle. That opening 11 seconds was hilarious. I mean, the fact that they fumbled on a kickoff, especially with this whole new dynamic kickoff thing, was just amazing. I mean, it seemed like the Giants that everybody has talked about for years. And the Browns did something crazy, I know. They scored after they retrieved that fumble. I know, it's weird. After that, I mean, the Giants kind of looked, what's the word I'm thinking of? Not sad. Pitiful, maybe? Sure, let's go with that. However, if you look at the stats, Daniel Jones looked like a solid quarterback if you're just looking on paper. If you actually watch the game, you would know that he still looks like a CD quarterback. Jones should be better at this point, though. I mean, he's been in the league 6 years, and honestly, I think he played better his rookie year than he's doing right now. Malik Nabers looked really good, and Devin Singletary didn't look bad either. And if you compared them to the Browns, I mean, hell, they looked like gold. It still didn't really look like the Giants wanted to win, though. I know it's a weird thing to say, but it looked like they were hoping to lose, and they did almost everything in their power to lose. I mean, the play calling alone in the second half, it's like they just went soft. This should have been a much higher scoring game, but I guess the Giants are also bad? Not that that was a question, really. We all know that the Giants aren't up to snuff. So let's talk about the Browns. Listen, this game was a shit show. And I have said every week that Deshaun Watson is just not a good quarterback. And I was proved right yet again. Watson threw 3 good passes the entire game, one of them being to Amari Cooper on that first drive. And then what? Just nothing? The Browns' offense isn't horrible. They let Deshaun Watson get sacked 8 times. Now, again, I didn't say they were good, but they're not the Swiss cheese that I've seen with some of these teams this year. Ford also had just a horrible day. I mean, he couldn't hang on to that ball. And even his runs just lacked urgency. Amari Cooper is the only one who played well this game. I mean, even the defense wasn't great. And I know Myles Garrett was hurt even before the game began, but seeing him go off that field, it was like the final nail in the coffin. Personally, I think that Nick Chubb should just sit out this season. Wait for the front office to get their shit together so that maybe next season he'll have a good year. Because if he comes back to this and it's still just crap, he did all that work for nothing. You can't rest the entire team on the shoulders of a running back, no matter how good he is. I could go on and on about how bad the Browns did this game, and really most of the time I do. I'm just going to say this. Before this game started, the Browns were projected to win by more than 6 points. And they did this. Let's talk about the Packers and the Titans. Listen, I know I'm biased, but the Packers looked great. So let's start with the Titans. That offensive line looked like trash. They let Levi get sacked 8 times. I mean, that's the same amount that Deshaun Watson was sacked. He also had 2 interceptions. And my personal favorite was Jaire's pick 6. It was just beautiful. Levi also just doesn't seem to be able to read defenses. Or maybe he just makes bad calls. Either way, I'm not sure which one is worse. And the fact that the play calling was so bad, I mean, he was in a lose-lose situation here. Not that their defense was much better, though. The thing that saved the Titans from this being just a blowout game was the amount of penalties that the Packers received. Speaking of the Packers, it's really impressive to see a coach that actually will tailor the game to the quarterback's strengths. As we've seen a lot this season, there are a ton of backup quarterbacks that really have no shot just because their coach is unwilling to be flexible. Malik played great, though. He took what the defense gave him, he didn't go too big, and he was our rushing leader. I also really want to commend him. The fact that this was basically a retribution game since he came from the Titans and they spoke so poorly of him. He was humble. He did not speak a bad word about the organization, about the team, about the coaching staff, nothing. He was just a great guy. On to our offensive line. Listen, they didn't look bad, but it was as if they didn't want Josh Jacobs to do anything. I mean, most of his yards that he had quite a few of got called back just because of the penalties. And I know not every flag was on a Jacobs run, but it really did feel that way. I can't say enough good things about our defense, though. Jaire, perfection. Preston Smith, amazing. McKinney, chef's kiss. I'm so glad that he got out of that Giants organization and is over here where he could do amazing things. I can go on, but the bottom line is the Titans were outcoached, outmatched, and they didn't really have a shot at winning this game. But next week, Packers Vikings should be an amazing matchup. Dolphins and the Seahawks. Let's get this over with, because honestly, it was just a bloodbath. This game was barely even watchable, and the amount of injuries made it seem like Miami had this curse that's just looming over their head. From start to finish, though, the Seahawks just dominated, but it could have been a lot worse. DK Metcalf and Geno Smith both played good games, but there's not much to say about the Seahawks. I mean, yeah, it was an okay game, but it was still sloppy. This game could have been a much bigger blowout. The game was also so penalty heavy. I mean, 22. Granted, that was evenly split. But after halftime, even the commentators were surprised that there wasn't a flag every play. I am also so over these illegal formation penalties. Either somebody needs to explain this better to these teams or something, because it's just getting ridiculous at this point. We all knew that the Dolphins were going to look different without Tua, but we didn't realize just how bad they actually were going to be. And I blame the coaches. McDaniel seems so inflexible. Yes, did they build this offense around Tua, even though the offense is pretty much Swiss cheese? Sure. But you need to realize the strengths of these quarterbacks are not all the same. What a good coach would do would be similar to Green Bay, where you are tailoring your game to fit the quarterback instead of trying to push these quarterbacks into your game. I don't know what Skylar Thompson's strength was, but Daniel should have found that this week. Unfortunately, he didn't, and the offense, like the previous 2 weeks, just looked terrible. Thompson kept getting hit, and then he got injured. Which is apparently just what happens in Miami now to quarterbacks. Their only option after that was Tim Boyle, and he was an improvement. Man, I never thought I would say Tim Boyle and improvement in the same sentence, but I guess here we are now. Even Tyreek Hill didn't have a good game. I mean, he had the most receiving yards, and that was 40. 40. And that's the most. So now the Seahawks are 3-0. Wild. Okay. Real quick, one last thing. I'm not trying to make light of this, but Storm Duck, there is actually a player named Storm Duck in the league, and he's a real person and not just part of the Darkwing Duck series. I really hope he gets better, especially after that shoulder injury. Number one, because I do genuinely want him to come back. And number two, I really want to hear the commentators just saying his name over and over. Moving on to the Chiefs and the Falcons. Another week, another Chiefs game where the refs just hand them the game. How many pass interference calls are they just going to let go just because it's the Chiefs? Seriously, it's just getting old. Mahomes looked like he did last season, like he's regressing, while Cousins looks like he just keeps improving. Now, if the Falcons were playing literally any other team in the league, this game would have been a win for them. But unfortunately, they were playing the Chiefs. Both Kyle Pitts and Drake London looked really good, but Atlanta just had no rushing game. That offensive line, even though there weren't any sacks, they just let Cousins get hit after hit. I mean, honestly, every time he put his arm up to start even thinking about throwing, there were two defensive players just in his face. And I know that most of these commentators get their scripts directly from Goodell himself, but I don't want to hear about the players' pets or the fact that the running back's sister was getting married and he was supposed to be in the wedding, but he couldn't be. So let's go to a shot of the wedding. I don't care. This is football. This isn't some reality TV Kardashians bullshit. The Falcons' play calling wasn't great, though. There were so many outside runs, and guess what? That doesn't work with the Kansas City defense. So why not just switch it up and try something that might work? Instead, it was like Groundhog's Day all night long. Outside run, outside run, outside run, and always getting stopped. If Atlanta had went for that field goal with 4 minutes left, there's a possibility they could have won this game. Instead, they decided to just give it away to Kansas City, since apparently that is all teams ever do now. And listen, I get it. Atlanta is not a fourth down team. So the fact that they keep going for it on fourth and whatever, they needed to just try something different. The Chiefs also didn't look like a team that was 3-0. They look more like a preseason team. Did they have a run game? Yes. Does it also kind of seem like Mahomes is phasing Kelsey out? Also, yes. And then at the end of the game, with that double timeout confusion, it was like two toddlers deciding whose fault it really is. This game just seemed so long, even though it really wasn't. It was actually pretty short. But that doesn't change the fact that it was kinda boring. The only shining spot, okay, maybe there were two. Simmons' interception off Mahomes was awesome, and the fact that's his sixth career off of Mahomes was even better. And then Butker missing that extra point, maybe he should be the one back in the kitchen. I still have a lot of hope for the Falcons. I mean, the first 2 weeks, they've shown a lot of growth. But next week, they play the Saints. And the way the Saints are playing, I don't know if they could actually pull this off. The Commanders and the Bengals. Listen, I went into this game thinking that the Bengals were going to blow the Commanders out of the water. For years, the Commanders have just been trash. And honestly, I didn't pay attention of the prior 2 weeks or even the preseason to see that maybe, just maybe, they had something. But this rookie looked fantastic. 21 for 23 with over 250 yards. And he showed more poise than most veteran quarterbacks. He made the Bengals defense just look irrelevant. There were no 3-and-outs, there were no punts, there were no interceptions or turnovers. And I honestly can't believe I'm saying this, but their O-line actually looked good. I think that is the first team this season that I've said that about. I mean, hell, even the Packers O-line didn't look as good as this. I also looked it up. They haven't had a turnover or a punt since week 1. And there is really nothing snarky I could even say about this Commanders team. On the other side of that coin, though, I really think the Bengals are trying to be the Bungles again. First, they lost to the Patriots, and then that debacle of a Chiefs game, which, to be honest, wasn't even their fault because the refs were just horrible, and things that should have gone their way just didn't even get called. And after last night, now they're 0-3. I mean, come on. That's totally a Bungles thing. Burrow and Chase both put up really good numbers, but their defense just wasn't there. Honestly, their whole team just wasn't really there. Not that they did anything bad or had any big missteps. It was just a weird game. And the refs were actually good. I know. Even hearing myself saying that this season sounds weird. In regards to this game, I guess I'm just going to use the word weird the entire time. But it was weird. They actually looked like they knew what they were doing and knew how to call actual penalties and when not to. I know, knowing how to do your job must be so hard. Wonder if they could teach any of the other refs how to do their jobs. This game was historic, though, not just because of the ref thing. This was also the first game in NFL history to have no punts and no turnovers. I mean, it's just weird. Okay, I'm going to stop saying weird now because it's getting too weird. Weird, weird, weird. So let's switch to something that I find fun to talk about. The Bears. Because guess what? They still suck. I didn't watch the game, but I watched all the highlights. They need to do something about that offensive line and the problem that they're not allowing anyone to rush, or they don't trust anyone enough to rush that ball. I mean, they had Caleb Williams throw it 52 times. Like, yeah, he had a ton of yards because he threw the ball 52 times. Their defense, still a solid defense. That's really all they have going for them at this point. And again, the game had so many penalties. But I didn't watch it. I don't really want to talk about a game that I didn't watch. I kind of just wanted to chime in and say that the Bears still suck. It must be a Tuesday thing. As I was prepping, the news broke that Brett Favre has Parkinson's. I know that he is very controversial, especially right now. Between the sexting scandal and the Mississippi welfare fraud, I know he's not a great guy. Even when he was with the Falcons, he wasn't a great guy, between the addiction issues and everything else that he had going on. But he was a great quarterback. He was my quarterback growing up. I don't agree with literally anything he's done outside of football. And even then, I didn't really agree with him coming out of retirement and then going to the Jets and then going to the Vikings. That's neither here nor there. I feel really bad for his family. A Parkinson's diagnosis is not a cakewalk. This is a tough disease, and this is going to hit him and his kids hard. So yeah, I feel bad for him. And the Brett Favre that I knew growing up will always hold a very special place in my heart. And even though I believe that he should pay for his crimes, I really wish him and his family the best with this diagnosis. Okay, guys, thanks for listening. Check out Saturday's podcast, Snarky Saturday, and go Pack Go. Bye.